Galactic Science Archives credit humanity with teaching that failure is part of success. The crystalline halls of Prime gleamed under three suns, their light refracting through walls that had stood for 10,000 years. Inside the Grand Assembly Chamber, representatives from 200 worlds gathered for the Millennial Scientific Achievement Summit. The chamber itself was a marvel of engineering, with floating platforms arranged in perfect geometric patterns and holographic displays that showed the assembled crowds the greatest accomplishments of galactic science. Doctor adjusted her ceremonial robes and tried to calm her racing heart. The had spent the last 5 years studying humanity, and what she had discovered both fascinated and troubled her. Today, she would present her findings to the most prestigious scientific gathering in the galaxy. She knew many would not like what she had to say. The morning sessions had been predictable. The Science Directorate unveiled a new propulsion system that improved efficiency by 0.03%. The Institute demonstrated a medical scanner with unprecedented precision. The collective showed simulations of their new mining technique that would extract resources with zero waste. Each presentation followed the same pattern: careful planning, exhaustive testing in simulations, and flawless execution in the real world. This was how galactic science had always worked. Failure was simply not acceptable. When turn came, she walked to the central platform with her data crystals clutched tightly in her hand. The holographic display activated, showing the symbol of her research, the flag of the human, Earth. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Humanity had only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. They were newcomers, barely worth mentioning in a galaxy that measured history in millions of years. "Honored colleagues," began, her voice amplified across the massive chamber. "I have spent 5 years studying the member of our galactic community. What I found challenges everything we believe about the scientific method." She activated the first display. It showed a compilation of human scientific records. The other scientists leaned forward, expecting to see the typical documentation of careful research and successful experiments. Instead, the screens filled with images of disasters. Rockets exploded on launch pads, sending debris across primitive launch facilities. Early spacecraft tumbled out of control, their pilots fighting desperately to survive. Rovers crashed into planetary surfaces. Chemical experiments produced violent reaction that destroyed laboratories. "What you are seeing," said quietly, "is how humanity advanced from chemical rockets to faster-than-light travel in less than 300 years." The chamber erupted in shocked whispers. Director of the Science Directorate stood abruptly, his 6 arms gesturing in indignation. "You are showing us failures, disasters. This is not science. This is chaos. This is incompetence." Had expected this reaction. "Please, Director, let me continue." She changed the display to show the human scientific archives in detail. Unlike the pristine records of galactic science, human documents were filled with sections labeled failed attempts, unexpected results, and lessons learned. She showed them research papers that documented experiments that went wrong. She showed them engineering logs that detailed catastrophic malfunctions. Most shocking of all, she showed them that humans deliberately published these failures, sharing them openly with other researchers. "They celebrate failure," whispered the science minister, her translator struggling to convey her disbelief. "How can a species advance while celebrating failure?" "That is exactly the question I asked myself," replied. She pulled up another set of records. "But look at what happens after each failure. The rocket that exploded led to a complete redesign of their fuel systems. The crashed rover taught them about terrain they had never encountered. The violent chemical reaction opened an entirely new field of study they called polymer science." She advanced through slide after slide, showing the pattern. Humans attempted something. It failed. They studied the failure intensely, learning everything they could about what went wrong. Then they tried again, incorporating what they had learned. Often, the new attempt failed too, but in a different way, teaching them something new. Eventually, through this process of repeated failure and learning, they succeeded. Then they moved on to the next impossible challenge. "This is inefficient," director insisted. "Why not simulate everything first? Why risk resources and lives on experiments that will fail?" "I asked human scientists this exact question," said. She played a recording of an interview with a human researcher named Dr. Sarah. The human woman appeared on the display, smiling in a way that showed teeth, which many species found unsettling. "Simulations are great," the recorded doctor said, "but they can only tell you what happens within the parameters you set. The most interesting discoveries happen when something you didn't expect occurs, something your simulation never predicted because you didn't know it was possible. We call those happy accidents, and you can't have them if you never try things that might fail." The chamber fell silent. The concept was alien to everything galactic science stood for. The method which most species followed was simple: research thoroughly, simulate exhaustively, and only proceed when success was certain. This approach had served the galaxy well for millions of years. Progress was steady, predictable, and safe. "With respect, Doctor," said the representative, "this human approach sounds dangerous and wasteful. We have achieved remarkable things through careful planning. Why would we adopt a methodology based on failure?" Took a deep breath. This was the part that had kept her awake for months, the realization that had made her question her own understanding of science. "That is a fair question, honored representative, so let me ask you one in return." She gestured to encompass the entire chamber. "In the past 1,000 years, how many fundamental paradigm shifts has galactic science experienced? How many times have we discovered something so unexpected, so revolutionary, that it changed our understanding of the universe itself?" The silence stretched. Scientists exchanged uncomfortable glances. Finally, the oldest member of the council, a named who had lived for 3,000 years, spoke. "None. We have refined existing knowledge. We have improved efficiency. We have made incremental advances, but we have not discovered new fundamental principles." "Exactly," said softly. "We have perfected the art of doing what we already know how to do, but humanity, in just 300 years, has experienced 17 major paradigm shifts. They discovered principles of quantum mechanics we never imagined. They developed biological techniques we thought impossible. They found ways to manipulate spacetime that our simulations said could not exist." She brought up her final display, showing a graph that compared human advancement to galactic advancement over the same time period. The human line shot upward at an angle that seemed impossible. The galactic line continued its steady, predictable slope, unchanged for. "They advance so quickly," concluded, "because they are not afraid to venture into territory where failure is likely. We seek to perfect what we know. They seek to discover what they do not know. And that, honored colleagues, requires accepting failure as a teacher rather than an enemy." The debate that followed was intense. Many scientists, particularly the older and more traditional ones, rejected its conclusions entirely. They argued that humanity's rapid advancement was an anomaly, possibly even dangerous. Others, especially younger researchers, looked at the data with hungry eyes, wondering what breakthroughs might await if they were willing to fail. The argument was still raging when an alert chimed through the chamber. The summit coordinator, a methodical named Vex, appeared on the displays looking uncharacteristically worried. "My apologies for the interruption, honored scientists. We have a situation. The human delegation has arrived." "They are late," Director said with obvious satisfaction. "More evidence of their chaotic methods." "They sent a message explaining the delay," Vex continued. "Their transport experienced an unexpected malfunction in the quantum drive. They spent 12 hours diagnosing and repairing it. They say they learned something interesting about quantum field interactions and will be including it in their presentation." Smiled despite herself. Of course they did. A malfunction that would have been seen as a disaster by any other species became a learning opportunity for humans. "When will they present?" she asked. "They are scheduled last in 3 hours," Vex replied. "Their presentation is titled Practical Applications of Quantum Field Engineering. I have reviewed their abstract. It is quite ambitious." The chamber buzzed with conversation as scientists broke into smaller groups to discuss what they had heard. Noticed that opinions were divided almost perfectly along generational lines. The older scientists dismissed humanity as reckless primitives. The younger ones looked intrigued by the possibilities. As the crowd dispersed for the meal break, stood alone on the platform, looking at the human flag still displayed on the holographic screens. She thought about the images of explosions and crashes, of experiments gone wrong and plans that failed. She thought about how humanity turned each disaster into a lesson, each failure into a foundation for future success. In 3 hours, the humans would present their findings to the most prestigious scientific gathering in the galaxy. Had read their research in advance. She knew what they were going to propose, and she knew it would challenge the fundamental assumptions of galactic science. The humans had developed their quantum field engineering through a process that involved hundreds of failures, each one teaching them something new about the universe. She wondered how the galaxy would react when they realized that humanity's greatest strength was not that they never failed, but that they failed better than anyone else. The three suns continued their slow dance across the sky of Prime, and in the halls below, scientists from 200 worlds prepared to have their understanding of science itself challenged by the and most unusual members of the galactic community. Dr. Sarah stood in the preparation chamber, reviewing her presentation one final time. Around her, the rest of the human delegation made final adjustments to their equipment and displays. They were a small group compared to the massive contingents from older civilizations, just 12 scientists and engineers, but Sarah was confident in what they had to share. "Nervous?" asked Commander Jack Hayes, the team's chief engineer. He was checking the physical demonstrations they had brought, making sure everything was properly calibrated. "Excited," Sarah replied honestly. "We have a chance to show them something genuinely new. When does that ever happen at a scientific conference?" Hayes laughed. "Fair point. Though I suspect some of them won't appreciate our methods. Did you see that director's speech this morning? He spent 10 minutes explaining how they achieved a 0.03% efficiency improvement through careful simulation." "Nothing wrong with incremental improvement," Sarah said diplomatically. "But yeah, we're going to shake things up a bit." The door chimed and an aide entered. "Doctor, the council is ready for your presentation, if you will follow me." Sarah gathered her notes and nodded to her team. "Showtime, everyone. Remember, keep it simple and clear. We're here to demonstrate, not to lecture." They walked through the crystalline corridors, and Sarah could not help but admire the architecture. Everything was perfect, precisely designed and flawlessly executed. It was beautiful, but it also felt static, as if nothing had changed here in thousands of years. In a way, that was exactly the problems research had identified. The Grand Assembly Chamber was even more impressive than the videos had suggested. Sarah paused at the entrance, taking in the sight of hundreds of scientists from dozens of species, all focused on the central platform where she would speak. She felt the weight of their expectations, their skepticism, and in some cases, their outright hostility. "Doctor," called the coordinator from the platform, "please join us." Sarah walked to the center of the chamber, her team spreading out to different positions where they could assist with the demonstrations. The holographic displays activated, showing the title of their presentation. She looked out at the assembled scientists and smiled. "Thank you for having us," she began. "I know we're the new kids in the galaxy and our methods are different from yours. So today, I want to show you not just what we've discovered, but how we discovered it." She activated the first display, and the chamber filled with images of early human spacecraft. But unlike presentation earlier, which had focused on the failures, Sarah showed both the failures and what came after. A rocket exploded on the launch pad, killing 3 astronauts. The next display showed the investigation, the discovery of a faulty O-ring, the complete redesign of the safety systems. Then it showed the next launch, successful, carrying the names of the fallen astronauts in their honor. "We fail," Sarah said simply. "We fail often, and sometimes people die. But we learn from every failure, and we make sure those lessons are never forgotten." She showed them the Mars rovers, the crashed landers and the successful ones. She showed them the International Space Station, built piece by piece, with each module incorporating lessons from previous construction. She showed them the first faster-than-light test, which had created an unexpected quantum ripple that destroyed the test ship. And she showed them how studying that ripple had led to the breakthrough that made reliable FTL travel possible. "In our archives," Sarah continued, "we have a saying, failure is not the opposite of success. Failure is part of success. Every time something goes wrong, we gain information we didn't have before. Every disaster teaches us something about the universe that no simulation could have predicted." Director stood again, his voice sharp. "You glorify disasters and call it science. This is not a methodology. This is chaos with a pleasant name." Sarah met his gaze calmly. "Director, I've read your work on propulsion systems. It's impressive, truly. But can I ask you something? When was the last time one of your experiments produced a result you didn't expect?" Translator remained silent for a moment. "Our experiments produce the expected results because we plan them properly. Unexpected results mean something went wrong." "Or," Sarah said gently, "unexpected results mean you discovered something new, something your simulations didn't predict because they couldn't predict it. In human science, we call those moments breakthrough opportunities." She changed the display to show the quantum field engineering research that had brought them here. 3 years ago, we were attempting to improve FTL efficiency. We had a theory, we ran simulations, and everything looked perfect. Then we built a prototype. The moment we activated it, something completely unexpected happened. The quantum field didn't just move the ship, it created a temporary bridge to normal space that shouldn't have been possible. The display showed the recording of the experiment. The prototype ship flickered, and for a moment it seemed to exist in 2 places at once. Then it exploded spectacularly, sending debris across the test range. "Total failure," Sarah said. "Millions of dollars destroyed in seconds. But in those seconds we saw something we'd never imagined. A quantum field bridge." She advanced through the slides, showing how they had analyzed the failure frame by frame, built new models to explain what they'd seen, and designed new experiments to test their theories. Each experiment failed in different ways, but each failure refined their understanding. After 47 attempts, they finally succeeded in creating a stable quantum field bridge. "And that," Sarah said, bringing up the final technical display, "is what we want to share with you today. A way to instantly transmit information across any distance by creating quantum field bridges. No lag time, no degradation of signal, perfect communication across the galaxy." The chamber erupted in excited chatter. Instant communication across galactic distances was a theoretical dream, something most scientists believed was impossible. The implications were staggering. The science minister raised her hand. "Doctor, this is remarkable, but you said it took 47 attempts to succeed. In galactic science, we would have run simulations until we perfected the theory, then built it correctly the first time. Why waste resources on so many failures?" "Because," Sarah replied, "we couldn't simulate what we didn't know was possible. The quantum field bridge effect only occurs under specific conditions that our initial theories didn't account for. We only discovered those conditions by trying and failing and learning. If we had waited until our simulations were perfect, we'd still be waiting, because we'd be simulating based on incomplete knowledge." She gestured to Commander Hayes, who activated one of the physical demonstrations. A small device appeared on the platform, about the size of a backpack. This is a working prototype of a quantum field bridge communicator. It's not pretty, and it's definitely not optimized. But it works. We can demonstrate if you'd like. The enthusiasm in the chamber was palpable now. Even Director looked intrigued despite his earlier skepticism. Several scientists called out questions simultaneously, and Sarah spent the next hour walking them through the technical details, explaining not just what they had discovered, but how the process of repeated failure had led to breakthroughs their original simulations never could have predicted. She was halfway through explaining the field equations when an alarm suddenly blared through the chamber. The holographic displays flickered and changed, showing emergency alerts. Coordinator Vex appeared, his usual calm demeanor replaced by obvious alarm. Attention, all attendees. We are experiencing critical fluctuations in the central reactor core. Please remain calm while our engineering teams assess the situation. Sarah felt her stomach drop. The central reactor powered the entire facility, including life support for the underwater sections where many aquatic species were housed. She looked at her team, saw the same concern on their faces. The displays showed real-time data from the reactor. Sarah studied the readings, her mind automatically shifting into diagnostic mode. The quantum containment field was oscillating in a pattern she'd never seen before. The frequency was wrong, the amplitude was increasing, and according to the displayed predictions, the entire system would reach critical failure in less than 6 hours. Around the chamber, the galactic scientists were accessing their own displays, running simulations, consulting with their teams. But as the minutes passed, Sarah noticed something troubling. They were all checking the same databases, running variations of the same simulations, coming to the same conclusion. This pattern of fluctuation didn't match anything in their records. According to every simulation they ran, it shouldn't be possible. She watched as team after team reported the same finding to the coordinators. They had no solution because they had no precedent. Their entire scientific method was built on careful planning and simulation based on known principles. When confronted with something genuinely unknown, something their models couldn't predict, they had no framework for responding. Vex was coordinating with the reactor engineers, but even through his professional composure, Sarah could see the growing panic. They were proposing solutions, but each one required extensive simulation before implementation. Time they didn't have. Sarah looked at Commander Hayes. He was studying the reactor data with the same intense focus she'd seen during the quantum field bridge project. He met her eyes and gave a slight nod. He saw it too. This was a problem that needed the human approach, educated trial and error, rapid iteration, learning from failure in real time. The question was whether the galactic scientific community would let them try. Director was speaking urgently with Vex, pointing at his simulations. We need to shut down the reactor completely and rebuild the containment field from scratch. It will take 3 days, but it's the only safe option. The life support systems can't run on backup power for 3 days, Vex replied, his voice strained. We have over 5,000 researchers in the underwater sections. They'll suffocate long before we can evacuate them. Sarah made her decision. She stepped forward, her voice carrying across the chamber despite the chaos. Coordinator Vex, I think we can help. The chamber fell silent. All eyes turned to her. She could feel the skepticism, the doubt, and underneath it all, a desperate hope that someone, anyone, had an answer. You've seen our methods today, Sarah said. You've seen how we handle the unknown. This reactor problem is something your simulations can't predict because it's never happened before. But that's exactly the kind of problem humans are good at solving. Director's voice was sharp. You want to experiment on a reactor that's about to fail? That's insane. One wrong move and you could kill everyone in this facility. One wrong move if we do nothing will definitely kill everyone in the underwater sections, Sarah countered. Look, I understand this goes against everything you've been taught, but your method requires time to simulate and plan. You don't have that time. Our method is designed for exactly this situation, an unknown problem that requires rapid iteration and learning. She pulled up the reactor data on her personal display. We won't go in blind. We'll make educated guesses based on the data, test them carefully, observe what happens, and adjust. Each attempt, even if it fails, will give us more information about what's causing the fluctuation. We'll fail fast, learn faster, and find the solution before it's too late. Vex looked at the reactor readings, then at the timer counting down to critical failure. 5 hours and 43 minutes. He looked at the other senior scientists and finally back at Sarah. Doctor, if you can save those lives, you have my authorization to proceed. But I'm holding you personally responsible for the outcome. Sarah nodded, accepting the weight of that responsibility. She turned to her team. Hayes, I need you on the reactor controls. Everyone else, we're going to need real-time analysis of every change we make. This is going to be messy, and we're probably going to make things worse before we make them better. But that's okay. Every failure will teach us something. She walked toward the exit, her team falling in behind her. As she passed Director, she paused. I know you don't trust our methods, but watch what we do. Because this is how humans solve impossible problems. We try, we fail, we learn, and we keep going until we succeed. And we're going to succeed today. The human team left the Grand Assembly Chamber at a run, heading for the reactor control center. Behind them, the assembled scientists watched in a mixture of horror and fascination. They were about to witness the human approach to science in its form, facing the unknown with nothing but determination, adaptability, and the willingness to fail as many times as necessary to find the solution. The real test of humanity's methodology was about to begin. The reactor control center was a marvel of engineering, all smooth surfaces and holographic displays showing every aspect of the massive quantum reactor that powered the facility. When Sarah and her team arrived, the engineers were clustered around the main console, their faces showing barely controlled panic. The head engineer, a woman named, looked up with obvious relief. Dr. Coordinator Vex sent word you were coming. The fluctuations are getting worse. We've tried every standard stabilization protocol. Nothing works. Sarah moved to the main display, Hayes right behind her. The data was even more concerning up close. The quantum containment field was oscillating in what looked almost like a wave pattern, but the mathematics didn't match any known quantum behavior. Have you tried adjusting the field harmonics? She asked. Nodded. First thing we attempted. The system rejected the adjustment. We ran a simulation to see why, and according to our models, the adjustment should have worked. But in practice, it made the fluctuations worse. Good, Sarah said, surprising everyone. That tells us something important. Your models are based on normal reactor behavior, but this isn't normal. Something is happening that your simulations don't account for. That's actually useful information. She pulled up the historical data, looking at the exact moment when the fluctuations began. There, barely visible in the readings, was a tiny spike in quantum field density at the precise instant the problem started. Hayes, look at this. What does that look like to you? Hayes leaned in, studying the data. Wait, is that a quantum field bridge signature? Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. I think it might be. A natural one, maybe caused by some kind of astronomical event nearby. If a quantum field bridge is forming inside the reactor containment field, it would explain why the normal physics aren't working. One of the engineers spoke up, his voice uncertain. But quantum field bridges are theoretical. Your presentation mentioned creating them deliberately, but they don't occur naturally. We didn't think they could, Sarah admitted. Which means our theory was incomplete. We learned something new today. She pulled up the quantum field equations from their earlier presentation. If this is a natural bridge trying to form, then the reactor's containment field is fighting against it. That's why we're seeing oscillations. It's like two waves interfering with each other. "So how do we stop it?" asked. Sarah was quiet for a moment, thinking through the implications. In human science, this was the moment where you made your best guess and tested it, knowing you might be wrong. "I don't think we should stop it. I think we should let it complete." The control room erupted in protests. His voice rose above the others. "You want to let an uncontrolled quantum field bridge form inside our reactor. That could tear a hole in spacetime. Or," Hayes interjected, supporting Sarah's reasoning, "it could stabilize naturally once it finishes forming. The problem isn't the bridge itself, it's the partial formation fighting with the containment field. Let it complete, and the oscillation should stop." Director's voice came over the communications system. He'd been monitoring from the Grand Assembly Chamber. "Doctor, your theory is based on extrapolation from incomplete data. You cannot know that allowing the bridge to form is safe. You are guessing." "Yes," Sarah said simply. "I am making an educated guess based on the best information available. That's what humans do when we face something new. I could be wrong. But doing nothing is definitely wrong because in 5 hours people will die." She turned back to the controls. "I need you to show me how to modify the containment field. We're going to try releasing the pressure gradually and see what happens. If I'm wrong, we'll see the fluctuations get worse immediately, and we'll try something else." Hesitated, then nodded. "The controls are here, but I want it noted that I am objecting to this under protest." "Noted and recorded," Sarah said. She studied the control interface, took a deep breath, and made the first adjustment. The containment field strength decreased by 5%. For a moment, nothing changed. Then the oscillation frequency spiked sharply upward. Alarms blared across the control center. Sarah immediately reversed the adjustment, bringing the containment field back to full strength. The oscillations returned to their previous pattern. "See," Director's voice was sharp with triumph and fear. "You made it worse. This is why we simulate before acting." "No," Sarah said, studying the data from those few seconds. "Look at the quantum field density readings. When I reduced the containment field, the bridge formation accelerated. But the oscillation frequency went up because the bridge was trying to complete faster. It's like trying to push a door open when someone is pushing back. If we push harder, there's more resistance. But if we stop pushing, the door opens naturally," Hayes finished. "Sarah, that's brilliant. The containment field isn't preventing the bridge from forming, it's just slowing it down and making the process more violent." Sarah pulled up a new display, running quick calculations. "If we drop the containment field completely, the bridge should form in about 30 seconds. During that time, the reactor will be completely uncontrolled. Energy could spike to dangerous levels, but if the bridge completes successfully, everything should stabilize." "And if it doesn't complete successfully?" asked quietly. "Then the reactor explodes and we all die." Sarah met the engineer's eyes. "I know that's not a comforting answer, but the alternative is doing nothing and watching thousands of people suffocate when life support fails. This is our best chance." There was silence in the control room. Through the communication system, Sarah could hear agitated conversation from the Grand Assembly Chamber. The scientists were arguing, running last-minute simulations, trying to find a better solution. But Sarah knew they wouldn't find one. This was the limitation of their approach. When faced with something truly unknown, simulation could only take you so far. Eventually, you had to try something and see what happened. "I'm going to do it," Sarah said. "I'm taking full responsibility. Everyone who wants to evacuate, do it now." No one moved. The engineers exchanged glances, then stepped up beside Sarah. "If you're staying, we're staying. This is our facility." Commander Hayes positioned himself at a secondary console. "I've got the backup systems ready. If this goes sideways, I'll activate emergency protocols." Sarah's hand hovered over the control that would drop the containment field. She thought about all the times she'd made decisions like this in her career. The experiments that had failed, the ones that had succeeded, the ones that had taught her something completely unexpected. Every scientist faced moments where theory met practice, where you had to trust your understanding and take the leap. Dropping containment field in 3, 2, 1, now. She pressed the control. The containment field collapsed instantly. The reactor's quantum core, suddenly unrestrained, erupted with energy. The displays went crazy with readings that made no sense. The quantum field density spiked to levels that shouldn't be possible. Energy readings went off the scale. And then, 31 seconds later, everything stabilized. The quantum field bridge completed its formation, creating a perfect stable connection between 2 points in spacetime. The oscillations stopped completely. The reactor's output normalized. The alarms fell silent, leaving only the soft hum of normal operations. Sarah let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Around her, the engineers stared at their displays in shock. They had just witnessed something that should have been impossible, a natural quantum field bridge forming inside a reactor core, and instead of destroying everything, it had stabilized the system. "It worked," whispered. "Your guess was correct." "This time," Sarah said honestly. "I've been wrong plenty of times before, but that's the point. We tried something, it worked, and now we all know something new about quantum field bridges. They can form naturally, and under the right conditions, they're self-stabilizing." Director's voice came over the communication system, and for the first time he sounded uncertain rather than hostile. "Doctor, I am reviewing what just happened. You solved a problem in minutes that our simulations could not solve at all, but you took an enormous risk." "Yes," Sarah agreed. "We took a calculated risk based on incomplete information because the alternative was unacceptable. That's the human approach to science. We don't wait for perfect information. We act on the best information we have, learn from what happens, and adapt." She brought up the full data from the bridge formation, already thinking about the implications. "And look what we learned. Natural quantum field bridges can form when certain quantum conditions are met. They're self-stabilizing once complete. The reactor trying to contain the partial formation was what created the danger. This is going to revolutionize our understanding of quantum field mechanics." Hayes was already recording every detail of the event. "This is going to be the most analyzed 31 seconds in the history of science. Every frame of this data contains information we didn't have before." Sarah smiled. "See, this is what I tried to explain in my presentation. Yes, we took a risk. Yes, we could have been wrong, but we learned something that no simulation could have taught us. And now everyone in the galaxy knows it too." She turned to and the other engineers. "Thank you for trusting us. I know it went against everything you were trained to do." Was quiet for a moment, then said, "Doctor, I have been an engineer for 40 years. In that time I have followed every protocol, run every simulation, done everything by the book. And when faced with a truly new problem, all of that training was useless. You came in with your human methods, made a guess, tested it, and saved thousands of lives. I think we have been doing science wrong." "Not wrong," Sarah corrected gently. "Different. Your methods are perfect for working within known parameters. You've built an incredible civilization through careful planning and precise execution. But sometimes you encounter something genuinely new. That's when you need to be willing to fail. Because the first attempt at solving a truly novel problem almost always fails. The question is whether you learn from that failure and try again." The communication system chimed. Coordinator Vex's voice was warm with relief. "Doctor, the reactor is stable, and life support is operating normally. On behalf of everyone in this facility, thank you. Please return to the Grand Assembly Chamber when you're ready. I believe we have much to discuss." Sarah and her team made their way back through the crystalline corridors. The facility felt different now, somehow. Or perhaps it was Sarah's perception that had changed. She had come here expecting to share their research on quantum field bridges. Instead, she had demonstrated the human approach to science in the most dramatic way possible. When they entered the Grand Assembly Chamber, the assembled scientists rose in a standing ovation. Sarah was startled by the response. These were some of the most prestigious researchers in the galaxy, and they were applauding the humans who had, by galactic standards, acted recklessly and without proper simulation. Doctor approached first, her eyes bright with emotion. "You did it. You showed them exactly what I tried to explain in my presentation. You faced an unknown problem, made an educated guess, tested it, and learned from the result. This is what I have been studying for 5 years. This is the human method." Director came forward more slowly. His body language was different now, less rigid, more thoughtful. "Doctor, I owe you an apology. I called your methods chaos. I dismissed failure as incompetence. But I watched you solve a problem that left all of us paralyzed. You succeeded because you were willing to fail." "We were willing to try," Sarah corrected. "Failure is just what happens when your first attempt doesn't work. It's not the opposite of success. It's part of the process of getting to success." The science minister joined them. "Doctor, I have a question. You took an enormous risk. What if you had been wrong? What if the reactor had exploded?" Sarah was quiet for a moment, considering the question seriously. "Then thousands of people would have died, and it would have been my fault. I would have to live with that for the rest of my life. But they were going to die anyway if we did nothing. At least by trying, we gave them a chance. Sometimes in science, sometimes in life, you have to act on incomplete information. You make the best decision you can with what you know, and you accept the consequences." "But how do you live with that uncertainty?" the minister asked. "How do you make decisions when you know you might be wrong?" "By remembering that doing nothing is also a decision," Sarah replied. "And often it's the worst decision of all. Yes, we might fail, but we might also succeed, and we'll never know unless we try." She looked around the chamber at the hundreds of scientists.